Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Women in Cyber campaign that we've been running within Deloitte for a few years. So really, today, the session, we're talking about exchanging stories in terms of how women have gone to leadership positions, and specifically the two that we have in today's panel. So I suppose we should dive straight away in. And Claire, just to sort of brief our audience in terms of talking about your career, what was your pathway to become a CISO, and what are the different kind of diverse journeys that you took before actually taking that role?
Thanks for the introduction, first of all, and very happy to be here. So my role, I followed a fairly standard techie background. So I did a degree in computer science. When I finished that, I did a year's internship. And that internship was brilliant for just getting that experience on my CV after college, that first job and that first year under my belt. And then I went into an IT support role. So in that IT support role, I got the fundamentals of user experience, understanding what the business is all about, all those key attributes that helped give me the background for where I am now. And I stayed in that role for a while, kind of built myself up, worked my way up through different positions in that company. And I eventually had an opportunity to start working in information security within that position as well. So I did information security officer, IT compliance, promoted then to an IT management role. And at that point, I decided, well, actually, I want to work more just in information security. So I went into advisory, into cyber risk advisory. And then that was just a stepping stone then to my role that I'm in now in the Volkswagen Group Ireland.
Very good, very good. I think that's sort of a lot of different hoops that you would have taken in your roadmap, and I think it's great. And Caroline, I'm guessing your journey was a little bit different from Claire's.
Yeah, so I suppose I didn't actually go to college when I left school. I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I started it off in retail, and then went into kind of office administration role. So from there, an opportunity came up to actually just log tickets on a service desk and a help desk. And I think the first time I installed a printer, I, discovered this is the career for me. So from there, I very quickly went into going back to study, because I always knew I'd go back to study if I found what my path was. So like that, I registered for an evening course in information technology. So I did that over the course of 4 years, working in a service desk role. And then from there, I always knew, although I didn't know why, but I always knew I had the interest in networks, and I also had an interest in security. And I suppose probably similar to everybody, security, maybe, going back 10, 15 years ago, wasn't as big. It wasn't cyber security. So I suppose I moved to one or two different jobs to be able to get that experience in networking, and then starting to get hands-on experience with security tools. And through that, then I joined the NTMA on the technical side, the network security administrator, worked a lot on gaining certificates, did a lot of kind of technical certificates over the years. And then I got the opportunity to move into management role, which I suppose gave me the other. I came from a very technical background, so then you've all the governance and compliance. I suppose that's an area that would have been new to me. And then I went on and I did a master's. And I'm back to now looking to do another technical role. So very much I didn't come from a family of kind of, a computer or anything like that in the home. So yeah, that was my journey in.
That's great.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Vaibhav, sorry, do you mind if I just jump in there?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so you're both obviously have had like very successful careers to get to where you are now. But how do you think that being in, male dominated industries like cyber and IT and security has affected that journey, particularly with kind of a smaller group of women in the management side of things and as leaders in those industries?
I'd say we could probably start with Ilan this time. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose unusually I've actually had the office experience. I've actually had a lot of female managers in IT. What I've seen is a lack of females in the more technical roles. And even when we're going out to recruitment, I find it very difficult to get more technical women. Whereas I think on the more governance side, you've got more female representation. But I do find that when it comes to like the men that I've worked with, and I have to say I've been heavily supported in my roles by men. So I would say it hasn't in any way stood in my way, but there is the element of if you can't see it, you can't be it. So I wouldn't have known what the position that I would have wanted to go for. I wouldn't have thought, because and especially in the technical side, because there is so few women, and I do think that's changing, but that would have been my experience.
Yeah. And why do you think that is, that we have such few women in the technical side of things?
I think because IT as a profession is probably not a well-trodden path. Like if you're going to be a doctor, you know the steps there. And I think a lot of the roles, and again, this is changing, I think with IT, there's a lot of roles there today, and you've probably heard this said before, that there's a lot of the roles that will be, exist in 10, 20 years haven't been, invented or thought of now. And I think when I was starting my career journey, like I say, security wasn't as big as it is now. So I think I think the tech industry moves so fast. I think, yeah, it's more difficult to see that path. I do think that's changing, and I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think we need to really look at it in terms of skill sets. Like, you can be technical, but you'll also need people skills, and there's such a wide range of, like, everything from, an account manager and an auditor to a developer. And I think, and especially when I was at school, that career path, that wasn't in any of the career books, that you could do any of these things in IT. And I think that's where we need to kind of focus, to really make younger women understand that there is so much opportunity, regardless of your skill set or your strengths.
That's a really important point there. And I think, I suppose, just to follow up on that, and Claire, maybe I'll add you on to this one. We've probably worked with each, like in the past, like for a few years, we've been working together, and you're like with yourself as well, Karen. So I think the time that has gone by, like let's say 5 years, we've seen that the success and failure between having more female-oriented roles in the technical field have probably increased. But do you think there's still a stereotype, or a sort of a bias in terms of when we plan to recruit people around that space?
Yeah, like stereotypes and bias, I mean, they exist no matter what angle we look at it. It's a societal impact. And I think as hiring managers, so anyone that's, drafting job roles or, involved in interviewing, needs to be aware of that. We know from research that women are less likely to apply for a job if they don't meet every requirement on that job description. And it's important to bear that in mind when you're writing job descriptions, because some of our security job descriptions, they include everything under the sun. Every little bit of experience that you could possibly have goes on that job description.
Unicorns.
Yeah. So, bearing that in mind when we're drafting them, but also for women when they're looking at a job description, it doesn't tell you the full story. If you're interested in the idea of the job or, the company, to apply anyway, and obviously find out more when you're in the interview about whether it's suited to you or not. So I think that's, really important from a recruitment perspective, of getting women that are, finished college graduates, getting women into the cybersecurity industry.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting.
That's
Sorry, go on, Vaibhav.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, it's really an interesting point, and I suppose it sort of draws your attention on the behaviors. And I think from a recruitment point of view, having very crisp and tight job descriptions so that people don't get overwhelmed. But I think there's a lot of, I suppose, overconfidence out there in the market, and there is ignorance about the ignorance of the overconfidence. So that makes it a bit harder for people with a fair chance to apply. But in terms of other behaviors, and probably a question for both, right? So, do you feel that, and Caroline mentioned that she has been supported throughout, around men as well in her journey, but are there any behaviors around empathy, emotional maturity, or perhaps just becoming a better listener to make sure that, women do carve out that path, whether it's a technical role or a governance role in cybersecurity?
Well, I guess,
yeah.
like I think for just in general for any leadership role and in cybersecurity, communication skills are a fundamental. And in cybersecurity, those communication skills are maybe a little bit different because you're having to take those very technical kind of risks and threats and IT controls and translate them into a format that the business, that non-technical people can understand. So it's a fundamental skill to have for CISOs, and it's a skill that women are very good at, and so are men. So it's not even that there's a difference there, but it's about the perception of it as well, and those stereotypes. So, like as Caroline was saying about changing the what's the norm and what we're being perceived as, and that's getting more women out there, more women role models, more women in leadership roles, and more women around the boardroom table, so that when you're starting out in your career, you can see that it's a possibility.
Yeah, I very much agree, Claire. Like in terms of communication being an important skill, but honestly, it's rare I've met a female leader who doesn't suffer from imposter syndrome. I don't know. It's and again, I know it's a stereotype, but it just seems that a lot of women do, including myself, always feel, oh God, I can't, am I good enough for that? And, there's this constant feeling, but I will say, and similar to that around the boardroom table, and one of the, I suppose one of the strengths of the NTMA, there's many strengths of the NTMA, but one of them is that they've always been, as long as I've been in front of a board, there's been female representation at the board. And actually, I think at the moment, we actually kind of outweigh female to male ratio on the board. And in terms of being, and again, bringing it back to you can't be what you can't see, I do remember, like, that was one of the first times I actually saw that this would be a potential. I would have never considered that I could sit on a board, but seeing the female representation on the board and very successful people, it just kind of opened a door of, oh, I could do that. Now, whether I choose to do that or not is a different story, but it was just the fact that when you can see that, and it's not, I probably would have not have even considered that as a career option if everybody around the table was male. Whereas I can now see it, and the more we can see that, then and it's the same for all women across the NTMA or any organization. If they can see that that's a potential, well, then they can start gathering the requirements and the education that they need to sit at that as their future. But you need to be able to see that, to say, well, that's an opportunity, that's a career path for me.
Yeah, and actually, because it's very relevant, something that you said there, Caroline, for me as well, because when I was looking for this role that I'm in now, I went onto LinkedIn, I looked at the companies that I was interested in, and I saw that the car industry is obviously male dominated as well. But I saw in Volkswagen Group Ireland that there was, like, on LinkedIn, it was full of like female management in there, in the dealers. I would be replacing a female CISO who was retiring. There was a female CEO at the time. And all that I was amazed by, and it actually attracted me to the company as well. It made me want to apply, because I was like, well, this is a company that's obviously supporting and working to build up that pipeline of women, to start off in maybe the internship program and then working their way up. and there's an opportunity there to do that with the company. So it definitely, I'm like a prime example of seeing it. And, you know, if you can see it, you can be it, because I saw it there. And that's what drove me to apply for the job.
Yeah. It sounds like you've both had good experiences with that side of things, which is great to hear. Caroline, I was wondering if we could go back to what you were saying about imposter syndrome. I know I've struggled with that a lot, kind of starting out in my career as well, and feeling like I don't have the skills. What would your advice be to combat that? Or maybe you can give an example of when you have throughout your career.
Oh, good question. There has been occasions where I would say that I did challenge that, but probably ones that I wouldn't share now.
Okay, we'll do that offline.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I found has really helped me is by doing certifications, and by doing, because I don't question. I know that the certifications I have tell me this is what my role entailed. So some of the more popular ones that people are aware of is, you know, the CISP and the certified CISO, and so I have a ground and a confidence that I do know, you know, I do know the underlying, I'm not missing anything. But I think that's also part of my personality. I can't look at the cheat sheet when you go to do an exam and say, this is cheat sheet. I have to read the big book, and then I can look at the cheat sheet, because I need to feel that I know everything. But there does come a point when you do have to believe that nobody knows everything. And nobody knows that. And the other thing as well, and I had this with a strong female leader at probably about 10 or 15 years ago, who was not afraid to, you know, go into a room full of, and it was always men, kind of the more technical guys, and, you know, say, give me that in layman's terms. So they would come up with all of the technical, and she just would not let anybody, you know, talk her down. Talk to me about that. There's nothing frustrates me more when somebody says, oh, this is I'm technical. Tell me what the problem is. And I think sometimes you do have to be that bit more direct. And I've actually been told that recently enough. You're very direct. It's like, I think sometimes you have to be. And so it's kind of like hold your nerve and be direct.
Yeah. So I suppose just, you know, if I may summarize that, the fear of losing shouldn't be greater than the excitement of winning, right? So it's probably about trying new things. And I think that the really interesting statement there was, you know, nobody knows everything. And I think that's what, you know, we should be telling ourselves every day. In fact, in my role, you know, probably being surrounded with a lot of leaders like Claire and Caroline, you know, sometimes you learn a lot from your counterparts as well. So you have to be open to learning, and hopefully, you know, and look, confidence and competence is tied together. And you know, some of the guys that are in my team are way more confident with way less information that they would have. But, you know, a girl would probably come up with a lot of doubts while she'd probably be having a lot of factual data to support her findings. So there's a bit of that and I suppose that's probably a behavior that I have noted, that, you know, you need to sort of encourage the opportunity to perhaps take a risk and be out there a little bit more. I suppose that helps as well. But again, this is probably not for me to say. Back to Claire and Caroline. So again, historically, you know, we've seen a lot of changes in the industry. Caroline, you noted that things are changing, things have changed. And are there any specific points that we could do more that nobody's talking about? I know that we speak about Women's Day. We are energetic about that around that day, right? But are we energizing the young leaders like Jess or anybody listening to this webinar to take up a role in cyber, to pivot from a different industry to come into cyber, and perhaps increase the population of women leaders in the island of Ireland?
So do you want to come in there, Claire? Or,
Yeah, sorry.
A lot of questions in there. Sorry, you can share that if you want to.
Sorry, yeah. So I think a lot is about a lot of attracting women to the industry is securing that pipeline. So it starts early. It starts with schools and getting awareness into schools about careers in STEM and what the different choices are. So it's all people can just view IT as one massive umbrella, but we don't look at maybe cybersecurity in that level of detail either in schools. So getting the into the schools to tell those students what the options are in cybersecurity and to break down those stereotypes, because it can often drive women away if they see it as a male-dominated industry. If a young girl still in school, she thinks that's that's something that boys do, not for me. Yep. So it's about getting role models out there that are women and getting the representation out at an early age for those young girls to see. And then also, as we've talked about before, as they work their way through college, having internship programs, graduate programs, things like that, so that there's some job security when you're finished and there's a path for those students working their way through college, that it's not an unknown once you're finished college. So really it's a pipeline. So it's starting young and working through the various stages within the career to keep women in the industry as well.
Yeah, I think that's kind of I've been lucky enough to have that experience, whereas in college I got the internship with Deloitte in cybersecurity, but all through my 3 or 4 years in college before that, nobody had mentioned it to me as an option. I kind of fell into it just looking through loads of internships that were being advertised and seeing what might suit. And yeah, but having that kind of security then of having the grad program as well after was great to kind of, I don't know, settle myself, I suppose, and like have a focus in my last couple of months of college, like knowing where I was going and what I was going to be doing, what to focus on, what to learn, so that I could be prepared coming into the job then.
Yeah. And you see it's changing because there's more like 15 years ago, there was fewer internship programs for starters.
Yeah.
And certainly not directly just focused on cybersecurity. So that's changing now as well. And, those opportunities are growing for graduates. And, there's another aspect to it as well that, how do you keep women in the industry? So as you progress through your life, and you start a family, like there's a massive drop off with women staying in the cybersecurity industry and their career growth after they start families. So how do we, as companies, and even governmental kind of supports, how do we keep women in the workforce if they choose to do so, and not actually want to take the career break? So there's lots of opportunities there as well for companies to support women throughout their careers too.
Yeah, and I'd add to that as well. In terms of, so if you've gone through the formal college project, and Jess, you have, that's a fantastic opportunity for women who are moving from, say, one industry and maybe wanting to get into IT. I think there's really good resources, and Vaibhav will know I'm involved in some committees. There's a lot of really good not-for-profit IT specific security committees around, and a lot of meetup groups as well. I think there's the WIP, the Women in Security, is a good group, because I think that networking piece is really, really important, because it's a free resource. Because like I say, not everybody has the opportunity through different paths, but if you can go along to any of these kind of events and get to know people and get to talk to people, there is a wealth of information and support there, I find. So I think you definitely, women should definitely look into, if you want to go into that area, look into some of these. I think that was one of the biggest challenges I ever did, was to push myself to go to a meeting on my own of a security organization. And I remember it was the biggest challenge. I can't walk in here on my own. I'm so embarrassed. And actually they were so unbelievably welcoming. And I suppose it just changed my relationship. And now I have a lot of contacts and a lot of friends in the industry, because eventually, like, you work with people so long, they become more than just contacts. They become friends, they become trusted partners, they become people you kind of turn to.
Yeah, and in Ireland as well, it's such a small network that
Absolutely, yeah.
people really do, like, you'll always meet people again, even if you're changing paths slightly or anything like that. You're always going to have those kind of meetups again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very. I think those are really interesting points, especially around I suppose the networking piece. I think there's loads of forums, and I think Caroline runs a couple of them. So there's huge potential to sort of be part of those groups and cross-pollinate ideas, I suppose, in the meetups. I do see a representation change for more women and girls, students going into that sort of a setup. But I think, I can't emphasize enough in terms of the networking bit, because the more you are out there, I suppose, the more friends you'll make, and I guess more chances for getting into cyber. I suppose just touching around the probably the final phase for our webinar, and in terms of an advice that you'd probably give to somebody like Jess, or who wants to get into cyber. What are the what are the areas that you would say that they need to sort of persist in and probably resist of as well? So, because whenever we are sort of building the career or shaping the career into a leader's career, there are things that we need to be careful about, and also that we need to drive persistence on. So, would there be a one thing at each level that what we need not to do, and what do we need to do if we're looking at a leadership role for cybersecurity? I'll probably get that to Claire first.
Well, I would say that, keeping that eagerness to learn. So, developing your skills, keep trying, because you can often, when you get a job, you can often kind of sit back and relax for a little bit and forget about the learning and development side of things. But keeping on top of that and keep learning, and working on those certs are brilliant for your CV, the CISP or CISM. Really trying to build the knowledge that you have, and to keep going with it. For something to avoid, I think I can't really think of something specifically, but I think keeping the networking and your contacts, and keeping it in touch with people. So whether that's like LinkedIn is a brilliant resource for doing that, and staying in touch, and not letting those relationships drop off, and like as Caroline was mentioning, even the those meetups. So keeping your contacts alive, and keep networking. I'd say would be something to keep going as well. Keep going with that.
Caroline, in terms of that one thing you would want people to be away from, or probably encouraged to do?
So I think I think in terms of what is the one thing that women who want to move into leaderships, I think that understanding, communication, and I think for a lot of women that's playing to our strength, play to your strength. Communication is it's the foundation of, because as you move from especially technical roles into more senior roles, you're managing people. You're not managing systems, you're managing people, and people are the most difficult thing to manage. So in terms of what could you do, you can do kind of courses, and most companies as well will kind of have some sort of learning and development. Do courses around the likes of coaching or mentorship, so you get to really understand how to to deal with human situations, because you will inevitably hit difficult situations, and it's very easy to kind of back down and step your point. But if, like anything, if you've got that rehearsal, and so I definitely suggest in that area do some kind of coaching or mentoring training. In terms of what to avoid, I think you need to be very careful, and I know I would be I would probably fall into the trap myself, but I try and hold myself out, is you have to be very careful that you don't end up with burnout, because it is a very stressful environment. And I know Vaibhav, myself and yourself have spoken about this before. You could work 24/7 and the risk wouldn't be, completely mitigated. And you have to find a balance that it doesn't take over. You really have to understand that no one person solves everything. It is a collective, it's a team. So you have to be very careful about not trying to take too much onto yourself. And in terms of what can we do from a society level, I really think we need to kind of look at the language that we use. So, I mean, I remember a friend of mine years ago saying, she really annoyed her when people described her as an independent woman. Oh, she's very independent. Do you ever say that about a man? And a man is never to describe, oh, he's a very independent man, but that language you use for women, because that should be different. So I think that the small nuances that we could really watch in terms of our language and how we talk about women, as opposed to how we don't talk about men.
Absolutely. No, that's an interesting point. I think there are some subtle phrases which probably are archaic and are still used, right? And I think it's probably good to point those out, at any level, agnostic to the level you are. And I think that's a fantastic point, to keep speaking with different people, network more, take mentorship and coaching sessions, but more importantly, point out when things are not going in the right direction. But look, that's all the time we have for today. It's been really a pleasure to have you, Claire, and Caroline, and Jess yourself, have an osmosis around different questions and discuss this important topic of women in cybersecurity. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you both.